Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Please be seated. Parameshvara. Om. Okay, good. Yes. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parameshvara. Good. Nice to see you all here this morning. Also welcome to all of our friends watching online. We continue our study of Chapter 6, and we'll begin with some recitation, beginning with verse 5. As always, as I'm chanting, please look at the meaning, so then when you chant after me, you know what you're chanting. Yeah, 5. Correct. Uddharedatmanatmanam, uddharedatmanatmanam, natmanam avasadayet, natmanam avasadayet, atmaiva hyatmano bandhur, atmaiva hyatmano bandhur, Atmaiva Ripuratmanaha, Atmaiva Ripuratman, Bandhuratmatmanasthasya, Bandhuratmatmanasthasya, Yenatmaivatmanajataha, Yenatmaivatmanajataha, Anatmanastu Shatrutve, Anatmanastu Shatrutve, Vartetatmaiva Shatruvata, Tetatmaiva Shatruvata, Jitatmanah Prashantasya, Jitatmanah Prashantasya, Paramatma Samahitaha, Paramatma Samahitaha, Shitoshna Sukha Dukkeshu, Shitoshna Sukha Dukke, Tatamanaapamanayoho, Tatamanaapamanayoho, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma, Kutasto Vijitendriyaha, Kutasto Vijitendriyaha, Yukta Hit Yuchyate Yogi, Yukta Hit Yuchyate Yogi, Samaloshtashma Kanchanaha, Samaloshtashma Kanchanaha, Suhrin Mityar Yudasina, Suhrin Mitrar Yudasin, Madhyastha Dvesha Bandhushu, Madhyastha Dvesha Bandhushu, Sadhu Shvapicha Papeshu, Sadhu Shvapicha Papeshu, Samabuddhir Vishishyate, Samabuddhir Vishishyate, Yogi Yunjita Satatam, yogi yunjita satatam. Atmanam rahasi stitaha, Atmanam rahasi stitaha, Ekaki yata chittatma, Ekaki yata chittatma, Nirashira parigraha, Nirashira parigraha. Good. We'll stop there and return, pick up the thread. Last verse we saw was verse 6, just introduced today's class. You remember that chapter 6, which is Dhyana Yoga, meditation, actually opens with a segment carried over from the prior chapter. Prior chapter was on sannyasa, renunciation, and the first 10 verses of chapter 6 continue that topic of sannyasa, renunciation. You remember that sannyasa has many meanings. Sri Krishna gave 5 different meanings in chapter 6. Here, the meaning that's significant is renunciation of desire, renunciation of raga, dvesha. Remember, this raga, dvesha we've characterized as 2 tyrants living in your mind. One tyrant says, do this. The other tyrant says, don't do that. And our behavior is dictated by these 2 inner tyrants. When you see something that looks good, one tyrant says, go get it. When you see something that looks undesirable, the other tyrant says, run away from it. So normal human behavior is dictated by these tyrants of raga, dvesha, and sannyasa in the current context is to kick these 2 tyrants out. To renounce desire means to become free from raga, dvesha, and the result is inner freedom. You are no longer under the tyranny of these 2 tyrants. You enjoy inner freedom, and that's what this final verse from the last class, verse 6, just to paraphrase the verse, in fact, in American English, we have a nice expression. You are your own best friend and your own worst enemy. It's a very significant and true statement. If those tyrants are present in your mind, you can become your own worst enemy because those tyrants force you to do things that are adharmic, and you get in trouble and suffer the consequences of living under that tyranny. On the other hand, you are your own best friend. When you get rid of those 2 tyrants, you enjoy this tremendous inner freedom that was described at the end of our last class. And that's the topic that we continue with right now, this inner freedom. And actually, pardon me? More volume? Thank you. Okay, not just inner freedom. Let's be clear. This is not a text on psychology, right? The topic we've just discussed is very psychological in nature, but this goes far beyond psychology, far beyond this inner freedom, this freedom from inner tyranny. It culminates in enlightenment. And that's the direction the text takes right now, and that is this sannyasa leading to enlightenment. And that's what we're going to discuss. Jitatmana prashantasya, jitatmana prashantasya, paramatma samahitaha, paramatma samahitaha, shitoshna sukha dukkeshu, shitoshna sukha dukkeshu, tata manapamanayoho, tata manapamanayoho. Good. Jitta atmanaha. For the one whose the genitive in case for our possessive case for our Sanskrit students. Jitatmanaha, for one who has conquered Atma. Does that sound funny? I hope it does. How do you conquer Atma? You get it. So you'll remember that the word Atma has different meanings in different contexts. Here it means mind. So Jitatmanaha, one who has conquered one's mind, one who has kicked those two tyrants of raga, dvesha out. And as a result of that, prashantasya, for the one who has become prashanta, completely quiet. Here's the context. Those inner tyrants make you very extrovert in life. You're always looking to see what you can get. You're always looking to see what you need to run away from. And that is the normal human behavior. But when you become free from that inner tyranny, you're content just to be as you are. Instead of being extrovert, you become more contemplative. Prashanta means completely quiet. So, and this is, by the way, we're kind of leading our way now to the topic of meditation, which begins in just a few more verses. So prashanta, when you become completely quiet, you have an opportunity to turn your attention within and discover that what you truly seek in life, contentment, peace, joy, happiness, love, the source of all that you discover to be within yourself. And that really is going to be the theme of meditation in this chapter, so we'll talk more about it shortly. So when one has renounced these tyrants of raga, dvesha, when one turns one's attention within, prashanta, when you become quiet, and you have that opportunity to discover what we loosely call the inner divinity, and what in Advaita Vedanta is more properly called Sat Chit Ananda Atma. Atma, the true self, which is unborn, uncreated, unchanging, full, complete, utterly unaffected by any problems. So with that discovery, next line, Paramatma Samahitaha. By the way, those words should be combined into one compound word. One becomes Samahitaha, established, completely established. Completely established in what? Paramatma, the true self, the so-called supreme self, the truth of who you are as Sat Chit Ananda. This leads to such a, we're going to see this more, but it leads to such a radical transformation of your thinking and behavior, because previously you thought that the true source of happiness and contentment was found through worldly activities. Now you realize that those worldly activities don't contribute to your inner fullness, nor do they take anything away from your inner fullness. Both these are very important. Worldly activities neither help you nor hurt you, so to speak, pull you down. Why? Because your true nature is eternally full and complete. You'll remember that we've observed several times, you don't become Satchidananda Atma. You don't gain a divine inner nature. It's an already existent truth waiting for you to discover it fully and completely. So one becomes Paramatma Samahitaha, deeply established. That word Samahitaha, by the way, it's actually related to the word Samadhi, which we'll be discussing in this chapter on meditation. Here, Samahitaha, fully and deeply established, so fully established that you remain established, Shita, Ushna, Sukha Dukheshu, even when you experience Shita, like when you're outside today, cold. Well, it's warmer today, isn't it? So if you feel cold, Ushna, if you feel too hot, if you feel Sukha, if you feel pleasure, Dukkha, if you feel pain. Notice if we're enjoying external things, those external enjoyments can be derailed. If you're enjoying, I don't know, actually Shita and Ushna, you're enjoying a cup of tea, not if it's cold, Shita, or if it's too hot and it burns your lips. So our enjoyment of externals is highly conditional. Everything has to be just right for us to enjoy the things in the world. But here, the so-called enjoyment, the appreciation of your inner fullness and completeness is unconditional. As we said, it's an already existent truth waiting for you to discover that and appreciate it. Therefore, it is unaffected by external things, something too cold, too hot, etc. Tata, in the last line, and similarly, your appreciation of your true nature is unchanged. Mana, apamana yoho. Mana, praise. Apamana, the opposite. So when someone curses you, insults you. Generally, when people praise and insult us, it affects us. When you are praised, you feel good. When you're insulted, you feel the opposite. That's all external. It's surprising the extent to which we are emotionally dependent on the affirmation of others. Isn't it so? We need others to tell us we're okay. And they tell us we're okay by either by praising us or at least by not insulting us. And in that way, we come to feel good about ourselves, but isn't that a fundamental insecurity? If our sense of being okay depends on other people to tell us we're okay. If you know that you're okay, you don't need someone to tell you you're okay. If you know, there was an old joke that Professor Einstein was taking a taxi someplace, and the taxi driver recognizes, Einstein was very recognizable with his hair and mustache and all of that. So the taxi driver recognized Professor Einstein and said, "Oh, you're that really smart guy, right?" So here the taxi driver is making a judgment about Einstein. And the judgment is that Einstein is smart. Tell me, does Einstein need the taxi driver's judgment to know that he's smart? You get the point. This dependence on other people's affirmation is a natural but undesirable emotional weakness. And we outgrow that. How? By discovering that inner fullness and completeness, which doesn't depend on any externals, Paramatma, that true self, and having discovered that, who cares? Really speaking, who cares about what other people think about you? Remember, I joked with you several classes ago about years ago when I would drive different places to give classes, and I would drive myself, I would get down and pump at a filling station and fill the car with gas outside of New Jersey. You fill your own gas. And I'd be standing there dressed like this, pumping gas, and people would look at me. Or if I'm going through an airport dressed like this, people would look at me. That taught me a big lesson, because I learned very clearly it doesn't make any difference whatsoever what people may think. When they see me dressed like this, do you think they imagine, oh, he must be a very learned monk trained in India? They think I'm a kook wearing orange bedrobes, bed sheets. Anyway, I learned that lesson very clearly. It doesn't make any difference what other people think. Okay. Then, next. Jnana vijnana triptatma, jnana vijnana triptatma, kutasto vijitendriyaha, kutasto vijitendriyaha, yukta hit yuchyate yogi, yukta hit yuchyate yogi, samaloštashma kanchanaha, samaloštashma kanchanaha. Good. Start in the third line. Yuktaha iti uchyate yogi. Uchyate yogi. A yogi is called yuktaha. And this is a play on words because both yogi and yukta are derived from the same verbal root. It's like saying a yogi is a yogi, but a true yogi. In this case, yukta means has so many meanings. Here, yukta means enlightened. A yogi has been successful in his or her spiritual path and has gained enlightenment. Therefore, yuktaha iti. That yogi is called enlightened. Under what conditions? Which yogi is called enlightened? Which yogi is called enlightened? Go up to the first line. The yogi who is jnana vijnana tripta atma. We have to break all these words apart. And once again, tripta means fulfilled, satisfied. Triptatma Atma is by nature fulfilled. So here, the proper understanding of Atma once again is mind. One whose mind, Atma here, referring to your mind, one whose mind is tripta, satisfied. Atma doesn't become tripta. Atma is nitya tripta, eternally full, complete, content. So that which becomes tripta, content, fulfilled, is your mind. Atma here means mind. Tripta Atma, one whose mind has become tripta, fulfilled through what? Jnana and vijnana. Jnana, knowledge, and vijnana, a special or clear knowledge. Jnana, knowledge, is what you gain through these teachings, through the practice of shravana. We've discussed here and also in our satsang. We've discussed at length. The main practice of Vedanta being shravana, manana, and nididhyasana. Shravana, a process of self-inquiry guided by these teachings. Manana, a process of removing doubts. And nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, through which you assimilate these teachings. So applying that here, we could say that you triptatma, your mind becomes contented through jnana and vijnana. Jnana, the wisdom you gain through these teachings. Shravana, when shravana leads you to appreciate your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, we'll call that jnana. And then vijnana, a special knowledge, a clear knowledge, is when your discovery has been further strengthened through the practice of manana and nididhyasana. So jnana, knowledge, spiritual wisdom, is gained through shravana, through these teachings, guiding you to lead, to look within and discover your true nature. And then the practice of manana, removing doubts, and nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, which leads you to deeply assimilate these teachings, that culminates in vijnana. It's very well ascertained knowledge. And who are we talking about? Let's remember the context. We're talking about the yogi who is yuktaha, the true yogi, the enlightened yogi, who is also described here as kutastaha. Kuta is an anvil, and very interesting metaphor. Anvil is made of metal, right? A blacksmith is shaping metal, pounding that metal against an anvil. What's significant in this metaphor is that the metal that he's working on, that metal changes, the anvil doesn't. Notice they're both metal. What he's working on, the blacksmith, is made of metal. The anvil is also made of metal. One of them changes, the other undergoes no change. So kutastaha is a commonly used word to describe unchanging. That unchanging truth in the midst of a changing world. That's kind of the metaphor implied by this. It's a blacksmith metaphor. That enlightened yogi is also vijita indriyaha. His or her indriyas, sense organs, are vijita, conquered. In other words, he's not under the tyranny of these silly jokes come into my mind. And when you see something, you want it. And that's an example of, or you smell something good, you taste something good. We are drawn forth by our senses. And there's a bad joke, pardon me for this, but somebody said, I'm on a new diet. What is your new diet? He said, I'm on a seafood diet. Now, seafood, of course, is fish. And, if you're vegetarian, how can you be on a seafood diet? And he explained, I see food, I eat it. This is a seafood diet. Bad joke. Okay. This yogi, though, is not on a seafood diet. Vijita indriyaha, he or she is not dragged about by one's senses. And finally, that yogi is described in the last line. Remember, enlightened yogi is described in the last line as sama, loshta, ashma, kanchanaha. One or two of those words, Starts with the word sama, same. And the enlightened one is one who is sama, who looks upon as being the same, who has an attitude of sameness towards three different things described here. Loshta is like a clod of dirt. Ashma is a stone. And kanchana, some of you know, is gold. So someone who looks upon dirt, stone, and gold as being the same. This is the idea here is when you have discovered the true source of happiness, contentment, joy, love, and peace to be within yourself, how does gold add anything to your inner fullness? This is the message. Nothing can add to your inner fullness when you've discovered your true nature as Paramatma, as that supreme self. Therefore, anything external is looked upon as neither desirable or undesirable. They're just facts. There's a wonderful traditional story about this. There was a guru who had a disciple. He sent a disciple out to beg for alms, and a very wealthy widow gave 2 golden bangles, bracelets, as bhiksha. And the student was so excited to receive these 2 valuable golden bangles. He brought them to his guru. He was so excited. And they were sitting in their hut on the banks of a sacred river. And the student held up one of the bangles to show his guru. He was so excited. He accidentally dropped the bangle, and it rolled and rolled and rolled until it fell into the river. And the student was just aghast, terrible. He brought that for his guru, and now it's lost. And he said, Guruji, I'm so sorry. Help me find it. Where exactly did the bangle fall in the river? And the guru said, I'll show you. He took the second bangle and threw it in the river. And that's where it fell. So notice the difference of attitude between the student who considered these golden bangles so valuable and the guru who just looked upon them as things, any other thing. Like a clod of dirt or a stone, the bangles were no more valuable, no less valuable. They were neither desirable nor undesirable. Our commentator, Madhusudana Saraswati, points out that this is an example of para vairagya. Now, the word vairagya you've heard before. It means dispassion. But it has an adjective added on here. Para vairagya. Para, supreme, complete. The ultimate expression of dispassion. Vairagya means dispassion. The ultimate dispassion comes when you discover your true nature as Paramatma, as being absolutely full and complete. You discover that inner divinity, so that nothing in the world is desirable nor undesirable. That is para vairagya. And that para vairagya is what Sri Krishna explains further in the next verse. Suhrin mityar yudasina, suhrin mityar yudasina, madhyastha dvesha bandhushu, madhyastha dvesha bandhushu, sadhushvapi cha papeshu, sadhushvapi cha excuse me. Samabuddhir vishishyate, samabuddhir vishishyate. In that last line, that sama from samabuddhihi is the same as the sama you saw in samaloshta. So same. The samabuddhihi, here buddhi means attitude. Samabuddhi, attitude of sameness towards everything in the world. This is para vairagya. Nothing is desirable, nothing is undesirable. Everything is just a fact. A stone is a fact. A piece of gold is just a fact. So that's the samabuddhi, this attitude of sameness. So samabuddhihi, the enlightened person who possesses this vision of sameness, the enlightened one who has paravairagya, this ultimate dispassion, who having discovered this infinite fullness within, is utterly undependent and unaffected by anything in the world. That's therefore samabuddhi, therefore the attitude of sameness towards the world. This samabuddhi, this enlightened person who has that attitude of sameness, vishishyate, is someone who's very special, very distinguished how, a very special person, one who is distinguished how, as having that attitude of sameness Towards whom? And the rest of the verse is he considers who to be the same. Look at the first line. We have words all run together here. Suhrit, mitra, ari. Ari is hidden in that compound word. Ari means enemy. So suhrit, friend, well-wisher, someone who helps you is a suhrit. Mitra, friend, someone who likes you. Ari, enemy, someone who hates you. Udasina, someone who could care less. So here, the context is the enlightened person has the sama buddhi, has the same attitude towards suhrit, someone who helps him, mitra, someone who likes him, ari, someone who hates him, udasina, someone who doesn't care about him, madhyastha, literally one who's in the middle, someone who's obliging, who wants to kind of make peace. Someone who is dveshya, hated, repulsive. Someone who's repulsive, maybe someone who hasn't bathed in weeks or months. But the enlightened person is samabuddhi, even to that one who hasn't bathed in several weeks or months, no problem. And also towards bandhushu, towards family. So one who has a samabuddhi towards everyone, including sadhushu api, breaking the words apart, whether those people are sadhu, here sadhu means good, saintly. Sadhushu, towards good and saintly people, cha papeshu, and also towards corrupt people, sinful people. Regardless of who they are, the enlightened person has the sama buddhi, looks upon everyone the same. No one is desirable, no one is undesirable. Please note that conventionally, people divide everything into categories. I like it, I don't like it. Foods, there are foods in your like category. There are foods in your dislike category. How about music? There are kinds of music you like. There are kinds of music you don't like. How about people? Right? Same. There are people you like. There are people you don't like. Now, that has some significance because the inner nature of every single person is divine. You've understood this. If every person is divine in nature, why should you be so discriminative and say, oh, I like this person and I can't stand that person? This is normal, conventional thought. Here we're describing the enlightened one who has para vairagya, the enlightened one who has transcended all this worldly thinking, the enlightened person who can embrace the saint, embrace the sinner, and embrace the one who hasn't taken a bath for several weeks. So this is the nature of the enlightened person. And that's the last of the introduction. As I said before, Chapter 6 begins with this series of verses carried over from Chapter 5, Chapter 5 on Sannyasa. So all of this we've seen so far is a continuation of Chapter 5, renunciation of desire, renunciation of this idea of desirable and undesirable, that kind of renunciation. Now, going forward, starting with the 10th verse, we finally get to meditation. And most of the remainder of the chapter is focused on meditation. We're going to learn a lot about meditation, and starting with this very first few words, we just introduced this. Um, I mentioned before, I think in the last class, there are so many meditation techniques, and there are so many focal points for meditation. You know, people will talk about, oh, you should imagine a blue dot and meditate on that blue dot. Or you should have a candle flame in front of you. You should meditate on that candle flame. Or you should sit in front of an altar and meditate on the deity on the altar. Or you should meditate on your breathing, on the inhalation and exhalation. There are so many things one can meditate upon. What you meditate upon, we can call an object of meditation. And there's a particular Sanskrit term that's used for object of meditation. It is called alambana. Alambana is an object of meditation. Alambana literally means that which you hang on to. Alambana, that which you hang from, so to speak. Alambana, object of meditation, is that which you hang on to in the sense of you concentrate on that alambana in meditation. So there are so many possible alambanas in meditation. Meditate on the blue dot, meditate on the deity on the altar, meditate on the candle flame, meditate on your breath. It'd be very interesting to look at Chapter 6 and see of all those possible alambanas, which alambana does Sri Krishna tell Arjuna to meditate on? Pretty significant. And we're going to see that right at the beginning of this next verse, and that is, what does Sri Krishna tell Arjuna to meditate upon? So let us see that now. Yogi unjita satatam, yogi unjita satatam, atmanam rahasi stitaha, atmanam rahasi stitaha, ekaki yata chittatma, ekaki yata chittatma, nirashira parigraha, nirashira parigraha. So Sri Krishna now instructs Arjuna about meditation. He says, yogi. Now here the yogi we're talking about is not the enlightened yogi that we were talking about 2 verses before. Here in this context, yogi means meditator. Yogi, a meditator. Yunjita, should meditate. It's another play on words using the same root over and over again. The yogi should meditate satatam, constantly. The yogi should meditate constantly on what? That was our leading question. Sri Krishna says that you should meditate on what? Atmanam. And there you have it. One of the most important teachings of Sri Krishna in the entire Bhagavad Gita is that and again, there are many forms of meditation, but it's so significant that Sri Krishna teaches a particular form of meditation in which your focal point is not a deity on an altar, not a candle flame, not on something you imagine in your mind, not on your breath. The focal point of meditation is Atmanam, here meaning your true self, the so-called inner divinity. In fact, later, we won't see this for a number of classes, Sri Krishna is going to say that inner divinity, Sri Krishna can boldly say, I am that inner divinity. Only Sri Krishna can say that. I am that inner divinity. And on that inner divinity, Yunjita, you should meditate on that Atmanam. And we're going to get into this in much more detail as we proceed in this chapter. So we're not going to discuss this in detail at this point. We'll discuss it in detail later. But it's so significant that the focal point of meditation is not anything other than your true self, that inner divinity. We'll let Sri Krishna himself explain that as he goes on. This is like his opening statement. He just says what it is you're supposed to meditate on. He's going to explain that in much more detail later. But now he proceeds to give Arjuna some very basic instruction. So how to meditate? Basic instruction. What do they say? Meditation 101. 101 is a reference to remember in your college days when courses had numbers. 101 is an introductory course. So here, Sri Krishna gives Arjuna an introductory course on meditation, and of course, we also get that same introductory course on meditation. So the yogi, the meditator, Yunjita, should meditate Atmanam, on one's true self, satatam, constantly. Where? Where should you sit to meditate? Rahasi stitaha. Stitaha. Sitting in rahasi, in an isolated place, a remote place. It means a place where you are not in the presence of other people, a place where you are undistracted. And that really is the key here. One of the biggest obstacles to meditation, I don't need to tell you, you know this very well. It is so easy to be distracted during meditation. So the first step of meditation is to choose a place where you will be less subject to distractions. Obvious. So rahasi stitaha, in a remote place, a secluded place, away from people, away from distractions, ekaki, sitting alone. Yata chitta atma. And the meditator should be yata, one who has controlled. One who has controlled what? Chitta, mind. Yata chitta means the mind controlled, is controlled. And yata atma, I'm trying to trick you now. One whose atma is controlled. Yata chitta, mind is controlled. Yata atma, atma is controlled. Wait a minute. Atma can't be controlled. You know that very well. We've said many times, Atma can mean mind, but he's already said mind. Yata chitta, mind is controlled. Then what does Atma refer to here? This is one of, I think, only 2 places in the Bhagavad Gita where Atma means body. Very surprising. So yata chitta atma, one whose chitta, mind, is controlled, and one whose atma, body, is controlled. Remember, the word atma simply means self. And that self can be understood in many, many different ways. Be ready for that in the Bhagavad Gita and anywhere else. So here, yata chitta atma, very, very rare for the word atma to refer to body. More frequently, it refers to mind. More frequently yet, it refers to your true self. But we need to understand the meaning in context. Just to make that point clear, words have different meanings in different contexts. I've given this example before. It's humorous. In English, if we have the word B-O-W, B-O-W, what does that word mean? Depends on the context, right? B-O-W, is it a sign of reverence? Bow? Is it the front part of a boat? Is the bow of the boat? Is it an embellishment you put on a present or in your hair? A bow? Is it the sound a dog makes? Bow? So I'm just making a kind of an obvious observation, and that is the meaning of a word depends on context. That's true for the word bow, and it's true for the word Atma. Okay, enough said. So this meditator who is yata chitta atma, whose mind and body are controlled, the meditator who is nirashihi, free from desires, and aparigraha, free from grasping. And these are words that really point to free from distraction. Nirashihi. You don't want to be thinking when you're meditating, you don't want to be thinking about what you're going to eat for lunch. Distraction. And you don't aparigraha, you don't want to be distracted by any kind of desire. Oh, I want a cup of tea, for example, during meditation. So nirashihi, literally free from desires, and aparigraha, free from grasping, unattached. The sense of these two words is free from distraction. The meditator should be free from distraction. Before we proceed, just an obvious question. Does it make sense for Sri Krishna to teach Arjuna how to meditate on a battlefield? That's the context. This is the morning of an 18-day, the morning of the first day of an 18-day battle. And it's a little bit late in the game, so to speak, for Sri Krishna to teach Arjuna how to meditate. But there's a feature of ancient battles we often don't think about. In the Mahabharata, they describe all this in great detail. Oh, the battle is described in excruciating detail. That's how the Mahabharata gets to be 84,000 verses long. Each of the 18 days of battle is described separately with lots and lots of details. And one of the details described for each of the 18 days of battle is how at the end of the day, all the warriors return to their individual camps and retire for the night. All the Pandavas go back to the Pandava camp. All the Kauravas go back to the Kaurava camp. They don't remain on the battlefield overnight. Now, this probably doesn't apply to modern day battles, but it did apply in ancient times to this Mahabharata war, which means each evening Arjuna would go back to his camp, which means he had plenty of time to find a quiet place someplace. He'd sneak away to a quiet place in the camp and meditate both that evening and the following morning before returning to the battlefield. So that practice of meditation on a battlefield was possible back at the camp each evening and each following morning. And that practice of meditation could bless not just Arjuna, but bless all the warriors. Just to make a couple of quick observations here. Do you think it's stressful being on a battlefield? You can imagine how stressful it is being on a battlefield. Meditation is one of the best strategies for managing stress. It's such a good strategy, many of you know, that it's taught in hospitals and medical clinics around the world. They teach meditation. They may not teach meditating on Atma, as Sri Krishna teaches, but meditation is taught in medical settings throughout the world because it's recognized that meditation can help you deal with stress. So meditation could help Arjuna and all the warriors dealing with the stress of the battlefield. Also meditation trains your mind to concentrate. Being attentive would be a great quality to possess on a battlefield. If you're not attentive, you're likely to be dead, killed, if you're inattentive, if you're not paying attention. So having an acute degree of attention would be a great quality on a battlefield Meditation trains your mind to be attentive. Okay, let's proceed. Basic meditation instructions continue. Meditation 101. Shuchau deshe pratishtapya. Shuchau deshe pratishtapya. Sthiramasanam Sthiramasanam Nat yuchritam nati nicham. Nat yuchritam nati nicham. Chaila janakushotaram. Chaila janakushotaram. Good. So, where should you meditate? Shuchau deshe. Deshe, in a place which is shuchi, pure, clean. So in a conducive place. So a conducive place, well, on a battlefield, I'm not sure. A conducive place maybe in the forest, which is right next to the battlefield. So to go to a conducive, a clean, wholesome place, like the forest. In your home, what is a conducive place? What is not a conducive place is in front of your television set, is not a conducive place. Another place that's not conducive is sitting on your bed. Bed is associated with sleep. You sit on your bed to meditate, don't be surprised if you get sleepy. So you want a conducive place. A conducive place could be if many of you will have an altar in your home, or if you don't, it's important enough that Sri Krishna points it out here. You should have a special conducive place in your home set aside for the purpose of meditation. If you don't, create one. Just a place that's dedicated to meditation and prayer and spiritual study, a place that's not used for any other activity. You know that we get a psychological association with certain places? Like, for example, when you come into this beautiful hall, this place evokes in your mind and heart a certain feeling. There's a mental association with this place. Well, you don't need to have that association only with this lecture hall. It could be with a corner in your room. So that just in a corner in your home. So just as when you come into this hall, you feel that sense, you can feel that exact same sense in your own home if you create a special place. It could have an altar, it could just be a chair, but it should be a special place set aside for the purpose of prayer and meditation. So in that special place set aside for prayer and meditation, what should you do? Pratishtapya. You should establish Atman in the second line, Sthiram Asanam Atmanaha. You should establish Atmanaha for yourself and Asanam, a seat. We're used to, in modern times, asana is often associated with a yogic posture, but the fundamental meaning of asanam is seat. So if in Sanskrit you wanted to tell someone to sit down, you'd point to the asanam, to the seat. Okay. And that seat should be sthiram, firm, stable, appropriate. Firm means, actually there's an important teaching here. If you sit in a chair at home, like you have that, you might have like a recliner or an overstuffed chair. Don't sit in that recliner or overstuffed chair. If it's too comfortable, literally, if it's too comfortable, it's a problem. You'll fall asleep. that chair should be stidham. It should be a little bit firm. Your back should be sitting erect. If you slump into that overstuffed chair, that's counterproductive. You will get drowsy. So that chair should be stidham, it should be firm, it should not be too comfortable. It gets very detailed here. Na uchhritam, that place you choose for meditation should not be na uchhritam, it shouldn't be too high. Na ati nicham, nor should it be too low. Some practical concerns here, I suppose. If it's a place too low, it might be subject to, I suppose if you're outside, water will find its way to a low point. It could be a very damp, muddy, or undesirable place. Na uchhritam, not too high. And I'm not sure what Sri Krishna has in mind by a place that's too high. I actually have a counter-example, and I'd like to share this with you. Back in the 1980s, when I was learning meditation for the first time, I was living in Santa Barbara, California, a beautiful town right on the Pacific Ocean. At the edge of the ocean, there was a sandy beach, but behind the sandy beach was a tall bluff. Not everywhere, but in the area where I lived. So there would be a tall, and by tall, 50 feet, 75 feet, something like that. It was pretty tall. And I chose as a place for meditation, on the bluff, there was a little, I guess we call it promontory, is that the word? A little part that stuck out from the bluff. It stuck out towards the ocean, and that's where I would choose to sit for meditation. When I sat there, in front of me was 50 feet down to the beach. To the right of me was 50 feet down to the beach. To the left of me was 50 feet down to the beach. And you might wonder, why did I choose that particular place to meditate? First of all, it had a stunning view. You just see all ocean around you. It was just absolutely lovely. Also, the weather in Southern California is extremely nice, so I just loved to go there and meditate every day. I would go there and meditate. My routine, when I was younger, I was more athletic. I would go for a long jog, 2-3 miles of running, and then I would stop at this particular point, and I would sit and meditate. What I discovered is that when you are surrounded by this the distance to the ground, really it keeps you alert. You don't want to get drowsy and fall over. So I found it extremely helpful. Sri Krishna says, don't choose a place that's extremely high. Maybe we can point out here that meditation is highly individualistic. It really depends on the individual. What works for one person may not work for another. That applies to meditation techniques as well. A meditation technique that works very well for one person may not work well for someone else. I'd have to share another anecdote. This is something I learned when I started teaching meditation. I had several techniques that I had practiced for years, and these techniques were so incredibly powerful. When I started teaching meditation, I would share those techniques with the students. And I was dismayed that some students thought the techniques were useless. I was a little upset. What do you mean useless? This is such a powerful technique. Well, I learned from my students that techniques that are powerful for me may not be powerful for others. Conversely, techniques which are not so good for me may be extremely helpful for others. And this understanding shaped my teaching of meditation, where instead of focusing on a few techniques that I found valuable, my approach to meditation became one in which I would teach as many techniques as possible, knowing that different students would find different techniques valuable and therefore could incorporate those techniques into their daily practice. So this is what I learned to do. So na uchritam na atinicham. Find a place for meditation that works for you. And more details. Chaila, ajana, kusha, uttaram. He's talking about the asanam, your seat. Your seat, which should be properly covered. Uttaram, it should have a covering. And what should the covering be? Very detailed. First of all, you should have kusha, grass. Kusha is a grass. So the first grass, and then on top of the grass should be ajana. Ajana is a deer skin. By the way, deer skin means don't go out and kill a deer. A deer that has died naturally, that skin is to be used. So first is the grass. Over the grass is ajana, deer skin, and over the deer skin is chaila, usually translated as a silk cloth, some kind of cloth over that. So he gives all these details for how you should sit and meditate, and then what? Now we get into, this is all preparation. Let's continue. Tatraikagram manah kritva, tatraikagram manah kritva, yata chittendriya kriyaha, yata chittendriya kriyaha, upavishyasane yunjad, upavishyasane yunjad. Yogam hatma vishuddhaye, yogam hatma vishuddhaye. Tatra, there, on your special place, on your firm seat. By the way, is Sri Krishna suggesting here that in your home you should have some kusha grass with a deer skin over that and with a cloth over that? Maybe that works outside in the forest and battlefield, in the fields and forests. In your home, perhaps that's not necessary. So again, it all depends on your particular situation. This advice is given to Arjuna, who's going to be meditating outdoors. So maybe in that context, this elaborate asana made sense for Arjuna. In your home, you have to do what works for you. By the way, what works for you, then just a little further. Sitting, there's a lot of important instruction that's hidden perhaps in those statements. When you meditate at home, should you sit on the floor? And here's an interesting point. If you sit on a hard floor with no cushion and no support for your back, will that be a little uncomfortable? Probably. And if you meditate in an uncomfortable situation, will you feel pain? Yes. And will that pain distract you from meditation? That's a problem. Pain will distract you from meditation. So if you're going to meditate, certainly you should have a cushion underneath you. Even Arjuna was told to have this grass and deerskin and cloth. You should have some kind of cushion underneath you. Also, support for your back. Now, if you are a healthy yoga practitioner, you may find it perfectly well to meditate without back support. But most people are accustomed to sitting with back support. If you don't have back support, you can slump forward or you can get a sore back, both of which are undesirable. So if back support is helpful, use it. Here's a funny comment. Is it okay to meditate in a chair? Now, the argument goes that the ancient rishis never used chairs, therefore you shouldn't sit in a chair. People will make that kind of argument. Consider the fact that the ancient rishis lived in ancient India, India being a floor-sitting culture, as opposed to Western culture, which is chair-sitting. There's a cultural difference, right? India, of course, nowadays, India, everyone sits in chairs, but traditionally, India has been a floor-sitting culture, as opposed to Western nations, which are chair-sitting cultures. So the fact that the rishis didn't, you've never seen a rishi meditating in a chair, because it would be a cultural problem, cultural mistake, to present a rishi meditating in a chair. They didn't sit in chairs. But the point is, the fact that rishis didn't sit in chairs is a cultural feature and has nothing to do with meditation. I'm dwelling on this at some length to really emphasize the fact that it's okay to sit in a chair to meditate. And for many people, it'll actually be helpful. And that's what it comes down to. What is helpful, you should incorporate into your meditation practice. What is not helpful should be removed from your meditation practice. So, I think we'll save this verse for next class. So let me just summarize here. What is Sri Krishna's instruction so far? We're going to see much more. First of all, there was one word, he said, when should you meditate? We skipped over that word very quickly. He used the word satatam, always. Now, always meditate doesn't mean 24/7, but it certainly does mean every day. Daily meditation is important. Daily meditation is not optional. Pardon me, many of you have heard me talk about this before, my so-called spiel. Spiel is a Yiddish word, I think, just meaning blabber, or something that you say over and over again. I apologize if you've heard this before, but it's important. There are many things that we do that we're benefited by doing them every day, and if we don't do them every day, we don't get the benefit. How often do you brush your teeth? At least once a day. How often do you bathe? You get the point. These activities need to be done every day to derive their benefit. Meditation is like that. You derive the benefit of meditation through daily meditation. Now, what time of day? In ancient times, they would talk Brahma Muhurtam, 4 o'clock in the morning. So 4 o'clock in the morning is not unreasonable if you go to bed when the sun goes down, which before the advent of electric lights, people would go to bed shortly after sundown. What time does the sun go down now? Well, by 5 o'clock, it's getting dark. If you go to bed at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to meditate is perfectly fine. But now that we have electric lighting, we stay up much later at night. So if you're up at night till 11 o'clock, then Brahma Muhurtam is not a good time to meditate. You get the point I'm developing here. It's another cultural issue. meditating at Brahma Muhurtam made sense for that particular culture at that time and place. In modern times, if you're up till 11 o'clock at night, meditating at 4 o'clock in the morning is a poor idea. Meditate at a time that's convenient for you. And that time that's convenient for you could be first thing in the morning, but need not be first thing in the morning. It depends on your temperament. There are some people, there are morning people and night people. A night person is someone, evening people, I don't know what term they use, night owl. That night owl is someone who gets up and showers, has breakfast, goes to work, and then they wake up. If that's you, don't meditate first thing in the morning. Meditate later in the day. Meditate in the evening. You're getting the point that building a meditation practice depends so much on your individual temperament. So let me encourage you to find a place or create a place in your home set aside exclusively for prayer, meditation, and spiritual study. And once a day, at a time that's suitable for you, go to that place and meditate. Over a period of time, that practice of meditation will be tremendously rewarding. And we have to end with one more point here. How long should you meditate for? Since Sri Krishna is giving all these basics, let me fill in the gaps. And the last gap that we'll fill in today is how long you should meditate for. And here's the problem. If you meditate for too long, it'll be unpleasant. If you sit in that place and meditate for 1 hour, you'll find yourself you won't be comfortable at first, sitting for 1 hour to meditate. And here's the problem. If you force yourself to sit for 1 hour or even a half an hour at first, and if half an hour is too uncomfortable, if you just find yourself being too restless after a while, it's unpleasant. And if something is unpleasant, we're less likely to do it again and again and again. The key here is to develop a practice of daily meditation. In order to develop that habit of daily meditation, it has to be a pleasant activity. If it's unpleasant, you won't do it every day. It has to be pleasant. And the way to do that is, at first, to keep your meditation sessions very short. If it's very short, it'll be pleasant. And short means as short as 10 minutes. If you start with 10 minutes, it's fine. Pretty soon, it'll grow to be 15 minutes, and then it'll grow to be 20 minutes. Eventually, it can grow to be half an hour, but then you'll be meditating for half an hour and enjoying it. It'll be pleasant. So let it grow naturally. Start with 10 minutes, and then let that length of time naturally grow. Anyway, just wanted to include some practical advice here. Sri Krishna is giving practical advice to Arjuna. Here's some practical advice for you. Definitely, it's an important spiritual practice to include the daily practice of meditation in your routine. Okay, we will continue with this next verse in our next class. Quick announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our question-answer period, satsang. Satsang will be at 6 p.m. Come and join us. This coming Tuesday, 3 days from now, is Gita Jayanti. Jayanti's birthday. And if you wonder, how can the Gita have a birthday? What we believe to be the historical first day of the 18-day battle. So the Bhagavad Gita occurred on the morning of the first day of the battle. The day that we think is the historical first day of battle, that day is celebrated as Gita Jayanti. We won't be celebrating it here. Often it's celebrated by chanting the entire Bhagavad Gita. We've done that before, but we won't be doing it this year. Okay, we'll end with our prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Navamahe Kaving Gavinam Hupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shranvan Utabasira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Hamratangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.